DC, thanks for joining us, mate. I know this is the new norm, buddy, on Zoom, but thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's not the same when I can't sort of smell your manliness. You know, I'm used to sort of either hugging you after a race when you've got all that man sweat going, or standing beside you broadcasting. So I'm not sure I like this new norm. But anyway, I'm very happy to talk about Australia.
When you hear this and someone starts to interview you, think, oh, here we go. He's going to go right back to the start. Look, I am going to do that, but they're going to go straight back to Albert Park. But you raced go-karts in Australia, if I'm correct, in the 80s, right?
Yeah, I raced at a place called Oran Park, which I believe is now like a housing estate or something. Yeah. And then I raced at Geelong. I did 2 races in Australia when I was 16. And this was just like the trip of a lifetime. You know, 16 years old, I'm going to Australia, which took about 3 days back at that time. Anyway, it was a great adventure, and there was such a big influence on my life, actually. I was down there with the family and some other racing friends that you know, Dave Boyce, who's been helping Jack Doohan come through his karting. And I've always felt good around Australians and the country as a whole. So I spent a lot of time there away from racing in terms of holidays and what have you. But in the context of where it all began, I think it's fitting for me personally that I was able to have some success down under. And, you know, the race in Melbourne has been a highlight for us all. You know, Australia, I've had Grand Prix racing for many, many years. And as you know, we were in Adelaide before that. And I was able to do my first Australian Grand Prix in Adelaide, and then very quickly come to the Melbourne Grand Prix, which, with the greatest respect to Adelaide, it just set a new sort of modern standard for, I think, the whole fan experience, the way the drivers were treated, you know, being able to be in this modern city and you know, cycle to the track or whatever. So it's been great memories.
Yeah, and that was 4 months apart pretty much, wasn't it? Can you think of that now? Like, same country, 4 months apart. That must have been extraordinary for you guys.
Yeah, no, it was brilliant. And I've always said in interviews, the only way you could top the Australian Grand Prix would be if we had it at the beginning of the year and we had another one at the end of the year, because then we could all take a vacation in Australia rather than having to shoot off to the next race. Yeah,
your success at Albert Park was pretty impressive. You were very, very quick on that circuit. You had a demon teammate in Mika Hakkinen. It was also a bit of a headache because we've had some of those. I did too, mate, as a teammate as well, as you well know. But your victories there, mate, tell us about how poignant they were. I think your last victory was there too as a Grand Prix driver in 03, is that right? Which was a special drive you back through. So the trophy's beautiful. I have great sort of memories of seeing my buddy, you know, lift that up. Our relationship built after that. But I see the affinity with David Coulthard and the Melbourne track has been a great marriage.
Well, yeah, you know, I really appreciate you saying I was quick round there. I think I was quick in a few corners, which involved big stops. Anywhere on the brakes, I was normally not too bad. You know, the sort of fast section through the trees, corner-wise, that you'll be much better at than me. Is it like turn 5, 6, 7 or something like that? The very high speed chicane. I always found that a bit nervy. You know, you're having to sort of be on the edge of adhesion at high speed. But anyway, I think I could piece together a lap there and find some consistency, and you need good fortune. And the first year I won there, I think the Williams blew its brakes out, actually. Heinz Harald Frentzen and whoever his teammate was. Yeah, 97, yeah. They were just, you know, under the extreme pressure we were putting them under from about 40 seconds back. They managed to burn their brakes out. We also had some controversy there, obviously, 98, the whole, you know, moving over from Mika thing, which, yeah, of course, like I did what we'd agreed and what I was asked to do, which I believe you should. You know, if you've got to honour an agreement, even though the fallout of that was terrible and understandably so for the general public. But you know, that could have been nice to have added a hat trick of victories down under.
Yeah, give them a little bit of background on that, mate. So the 98, I know what went on, but just the people that might not be au fait, there was a bit of uproar on Monday morning after the race also. But what you're comfortable with, tell us about how and why quickly that race was a bit controversial between the two teammates at McLaren.
Well, I'll tell you everything because it's already out there in my book. It's still available somewhere. It is what it is.
I've got it on the book.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. Well, it's good if you suffer from insomnia. It'll put you to sleep just like that. But anyway, 98, we had a car that was just quicker than everyone in winter testing. Right from the very first proper run we did, it was like, you know, 3/4 second quicker. Just utopia for a driver in terms of, you know, performance. But we never managed to do more than 25 consecutive laps in testing before going to Melbourne. We tried to do Grand Prix distances and the car kept stopping, kept having problems. So we arrive in Melbourne, as you know, as a racer, full of optimism that even though we can't finish a race, we're going to finish this one and it's going to be good. And so basically Ron Dennis said, you know, we do qualifying as normal. And we fully expected, so confident we were, that we'd have a front row lockout, which is what happened. Mika got the pole. And the agreement was, Ron wanted it to be based on qualifying, but I knew Mika was pretty handy. So what we agreed before qualifying was whoever got out of the first corner first would remain unchallenged under normal conditions, and we'd bring the car
home. Because I know who's a good starter. I know who's a good starter.
Yeah, exactly. And there's actually, I've got a photograph of me on the Saturday night after qualifying, out on the grid, just sort of sitting in the second place position, visualizing my start. I was convinced I was going to lead that Grand Prix and going to win that Grand Prix. And unfortunately, for once, Mika made a good start and we went off in order. Then he had an issue where he misheard his engineer telling him to cool his brakes. He thought that meant pit now. So he did an extra pit stop that was never part of the plan, and that put him behind me. And then, of course, the team said, well, look, he led into the first corner. You've got to let him past. So I had to slow down even more, eventually allow him to overtake on the pit straight because I didn't want it to make it look like he was just, gubbing me. And we finished in that order. And then, of course, then the media went crazy because team orders weren't allowed and all the stuff that we understand. And I've got a little, in my museum in Scotland, there's a picture from, I think it's the Herald Sun. Is that the local paper in Melbourne?
Yep.
Yeah. The front page had Mika crying and me standing there looking a bit kind of pissed off. And the caption is, I don't know why you're crying. I let you win, didn't I? I thought that was a good Australian front page. So I have that framed.
Yeah, trust the Aussies to come up with a crack of a headline, mate. Back to the event a little bit in the city, I suppose, mate. I mean, you've been there, correct me if I'm wrong, probably every year since you stopped in 98. We were teammates. You stopped racing in 98, and that's now 12 years ago, which is extraordinary.
2008. So, you said 98.
Sorry, mate, yeah, 2008.
Yeah.
The event itself, we get there. Australians, we can be, because we're a long way away, mate, we can be a little bit insecure about how we put an event on or how good our city is or what we do, because we look for that gratification. But there's no better man than you. You've been around the world, you've travelled everywhere and you've competed everywhere. The Melbourne Grand Prix, quickly, I bang on about it, but it is a pretty spectacular event, isn't it?
It is the best event that we go to all year. And I say that as the president of the BRDC at Silverstone, which is, the other big Grand Prix of the year in my mind, in terms of, great fan experience. But there's the thing that separates it for me is, of course, the weather is something. The sun shines more often when we're in Melbourne. And the sort of, let's say, we know we've got the Paddock Club and then you've got the general grandstands. But in Melbourne, they utilise all of the other areas that are available within Albert Park. And it feels that you're in a combination of 21st birthday parties, wedding ceremonies, hen parties, not in terms of sort of craziness, but just the way people get dressed up, which is the thing that sets it apart from our own British Grand Prix, where people just go comfortably, jeans and T-shirt or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they do make a tremendous effort to dress up. It's a big occasion. Yourself now, mate, you've transitioned unbelievably well from cockpit into many different projects. The Women's Series, Formula W, which is, so explain that quickly, how that's going and what the future lies there.
Well, W Series is something that we've only had one season. It started last year. We partnered with DTM with 6 races. And the goal is to create a platform that enables women that have got racing talent and desire, that have come up through karting and then previously probably would have lost some momentum when they get to cars because of the cost. It gives them a free-to-enter championship, which is based on an elimination process of finding who are the most ready for the W Series at that given time. And then once they're there, they've got training programs, simulator programs. We're really trying to give them an opportunity to develop their skills. And we've got drivers from all around the world. The growth in terms of going from year 1 to year 2 was looking great. In terms of FIA have been recognising it with the super license points. We've been in talks with a few of the different Grand Prix venues about W Series being a partner, and we announced that we'd be in Mexico and Austin this year, which again shows the sort of growth, because if you can get the women's championship W Series running on the undercard of Formula One, it really, I think, marries together a great story. And then COVID-19 came along, and instead of us being, here talking about the first few races, we're ahead of, we've had to revert to a online championship, which will be starting next month, which is right on our doorstep. And then we're having to wait and see how the racing world unfolds. So right now we're sort of in a holding pattern. We've got all the talent there ready to go racing. They're still going through the training programs and they're still connected with the organisers, but there's been no physical racing as yet. But I've got to say the Australian Grand Prix Corporation have been great to talk to about the future of, maybe getting W Series down there, and wasn't never going to happen for this year, just in timing, but hopefully in the near future. Yeah,
and quickly, motorsport going forward, how do we see Formula One, mate, going this year? What's your latest information on that?
Quite clearly, this has been a horrible situation for many people around the world. So putting the health side and acknowledging that, putting that to one side and answer your question in regards to sport, there'll be a time in the future where we won't remember that we've had these difficult times in terms of the business of motorsport and Formula One. But of course, there will be casualties. Some small formulas will disappear. Some people will lose their jobs. It's a horrible reality of life. But as sure as we're having this conversation, there is a need for speed. There is a need for ingenuity. There is a need for design and finding solutions and competition. And Formula One is at the forefront of that. And people want to be entertained. And I think the combination of Formula One will find its way. The Australian Grand Prix will sadly missed out a Grand Prix this year, but we will be there, pandemic willing, in March next year. And humans are survivors. They're about looking forward. We've got to learn from the past, but this time next year, I very much hope for beyond, obviously it'll be March rather than this time next year, but, very much look forward to having a cooling ale in the paddock after the Grand Prix and reflecting on another brilliant first race of the season. So I think things, it's a speed bump in the road. It's a big one, but we will recover. Yeah,
well, I share your optimism, mate, because I think Formula One, you're right. Health-wise, that's the pole position for the public out there. But obviously, sport is there's nothing else that brings people together like sport does in Formula One. There's so many different branches off that technically, and tourism that comes with our sport, and lots of different sensational things. So, mate, I think that's, we don't want to take too much of your time. You're a busy man. I think everyone from the Australian Grand Prix Corporation would be thankful for your time this morning. They all love you, mate. So thanks for your time.
Yeah, well, no, I really appreciate that. And, it may sound slightly sycophantic because we're on talking about the Australian Grand Prix Corporation, but this, it is a fantastically organised event, but it's in such a calm way. For me, it's a privilege and a pleasure to be able to be involved and to go down to Australia. And then just now, not being in that sort of spotlight of being a driver, I can actually sort of mingle with the race fans, because let's be honest, that's how I started, as a race fan. And you've been there as well. So we go from being one of the race fans to then being one of the the people behind the wheel, and then of course you appreciate the fans, but you can't spend the time with them because you otherwise you don't do your job. So it becomes a slightly difficult challenge, and you'll know how difficult that is when you're an Australian at the Australian Grand Prix. Everybody wants your time, and actually you've got to deliver in the car. So that feels uncomfortable when you're a naturally social person. So I'm in a much more comfortable place now where we can actually enjoy the event and see everyone sort of having a good time. So looking forward to doing that again, and I hope there hasn't been too many casualties down there. Yeah. Well, thanks for your time, mate. I know they're looking forward to having you down there again in 21. So all the best. Have a good day, buddy. All the best. Ciao. Cheers. Thanks, Mark.